Good afternoon, everybody. It's about 5:30 on March 4th, Friday afternoon. We're out moving some snow. We're going to start a new video series called 5 Minutes or Less, or Farming in 5 Minutes or Less. And I'm going to try to cover some of the issues that people who are not farmers may not understand about farming. So we are in Western Canada, specifically East Central Alberta is where we farm. This is technically a desert where I live. We get very little rainfall. We have very poor soil that we farm here. We're very long ways from anywhere. There's not a whole lot of people around here, so we are in a very unique situation when you compare us to, say, Manitoba or to the Corn Belt in the United States. So something I want to bring to everybody's attention is just how much outside factors influence our farming and how profitable it can be. So last year when we bought our fertilizer and stuff, we had certain prices, obviously. Well, I was just at my local ag retailer today, and I've been following a lot more closely than this, but anyways, and some of the prices on things, specifically fertilizer and on one particular chemical, have gone up nearly 300% since last year. Well, golly, Tyler, that sure is a really big increase. Yes, it sure is a big increase. So why did we get that big of an increase? Well, the way our government handled the pandemic, we created ourselves a whole bunch of shipping and supply line problems that we really created through poor regulation and making people not go to work and all those kinds of things. And then we have disagreements between countries, specifically China, who produces a lot of our glyphosate and the products in it. And they also produce and handle a lot of our fertilizer. So when countries start throwing sanctions and other disagreeable trade regulations at each other, we get the problems where fertilizer goes up an awful lot. Some fertilizers are actually only produced somewhere because they're actually mined. For example, potash is mainly produced in Saskatchewan and in some places in Russia. So you can go, wait a second, Tyler, I'm starting to hear something familiar here. Something, something Russia. Yes, something, something Russia. So now countries are putting sanctions possibly on Russia. And if they're ones that were producing our fertilizer, and now we're no longer allowed to buy their stuff, or it's really, really expensive for us to do so, it now has to come from other places like Saskatchewan. So even though they're sitting on mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of potash there, because they now became the only retailer in the world, it hasn't actually happened yet, they've become the only retailer in the world, you can see how now we have a monopoly on things and it can get very expensive very quickly because the world price for them to ship it somewhere else has to be as high as what they'll ship domestically, or else they'll just ship it all internationally and screw the guys who live right next door. So you can see how that creates some problems. If you ran a business and your prices went up by 300%, that would cause you some concern. It may even make your business non-viable. And that is definitely the case for some farmers here in Western Canada. If our fertilizer has gone up 300%, we can't afford to use the same levels we were using before, and that can lead to some production problems. We have seen an increase in grain prices in the past year. That's mostly due to the fact that Western Canada didn't produce very much because there was, a big drought, and we produced like 20 to 30% of what we normally produce, which is really sucky. So we have farmers coming off of a really bad year already with their credit stretched to the limit, or in some cases further than the limit. Us included, we lost several $100,000 last year farming, which is really sucky. So now you have farmers in that kind of a situation, and now you have an exponential increase in prices, and it puts a lot of us in a very sketchy situation that we don't really want to be in. So that makes life a little bit stressful for some of us, all of us farmers, makes life difficult for us, and we're not exactly sure how things are going to play out. This is a little bit of the reason why I went to Ottawa, was because the whole supply chain breakdown, blah, 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 is part of the globalist agenda. You go and take a look at the World Economic Forum and wanting to make a one world government and all those kind of things. Part of the key is to get rid of the private landowners, and the private landowners are farmers. So they want to try to find a way to starve us out. And the best way to starve us out is through artificial supply chain shortages, blah, 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 make our lives a lot more difficult and expensive and make us non-profitable so that we have to, eventually, the land is the thing that we use for our credit because it has a lot of value. They want to take over it. And then when they own the land, they own the means to production for food. And then you can see how this goes, because when they're talking about manufactured food shortages and starvation, those kind of things, as well as producing food the way they want to, which the way they see sustainable and the way I see sustainable are very different. Theirs have an awful lot of synthetic chemicals and those kind of things, and I see sustainable as having as few of those as possible. So when you see those kind of people are wanting to do those kinds of things, and you can see this is playing right along into their plan, you get a little concerned and you try to do something about it. So that's a little bit how COVID is playing into farming and the economies of various things and how they affect farming in 5 minutes or less. Stay tuned to the next episode. We'll talk about something else that's interesting.